It's an extra stress, though. It's an extra stimulus. So do you have an insight into how coaches are dealing with this? Because if someone listening to the podcast now has their coach and the coach plans out their weekly training sessions, and now they take their weekly training sessions and they just decide to do some of them to also get a heat adaptation. I had this debate recently with a client where he decided to start adding in like 5 30-minute sauna sessions a week into his training session. I was like, well, it's fine if we want to talk about sauna and we want to talk about heat shock proteins, but we're adding an extra stress. So we need to adjust something else because we're looking for an adaptation. We're looking for a response to training, not just to get green boxes and training peaks. We have an output goal. We're looking to go fast in bike races. How are coaches, or how do you recommend the interplay of training duration, intensity with adding extra heat training protocol into a week?
That's a great question. Again, it's going to be somewhat individual. I'll give some examples, and then that way, hopefully, it gives people something to play with. The first thing I'd say is it's 100% that, right? Like, don't do this without consulting your coach, because it is another stress. If they haven't planned it, then, and you're just adding it in, you're going to throw off everything they're planning. So we have over 150 coaches in our coaching program. That's not any of I'm not including our world tour teams. This is just more age group and even some others outside of that. But the reason we grow that program is that we spend a lot of time educating and providing information and even allowing them to exchange information between coaches, because they can then take the time to individualize it to the athlete and look at their biomarkers. So they should look at all your raw data and probably adjust to what you're doing. I would say there's a couple examples. So like if you have like 2 weeks and you have a training block, the same way you would treat like an altitude training camp, maybe reduce some of your other stresses, go for more like volume, less intensity, things like that. If you have 2 weeks, you can get pretty heat adapted pretty quickly if you're doing a session essentially every day. So if you did, let's call it 6 sessions, 6 heat sessions, where you have enough time in your heat training zone over that period of time, so 6 per week, so 12 sessions, you can get to like a top level, pretty high level of heat adaptation. That's quite good.
Yeah.
If you then kind of look at it the other way, we have other programs where if you have 6 weeks and you're doing, let's call it 2 to 3 sessions per week, you can get to, let's call it 60%. Like you can still get benefit, right? And that's still good and that's still important, but you're going to get like a 60% of your maximum adaptation over that period of time if that's the number of sessions you're doing. And then if you drag that out maybe even further, you look at like a 12-week period with 2 to 3 times per week, then again, you're going to get to like 80% there. The interesting part is those are examples of like different ways of doing it. Once you've hit like a high level, once you're at like the 80%, let's say, it's a lot easier to maintain. So then you could go down and you could do maybe 2 heat sessions per week. And that's going to give you, enough to maintain essentially that 80% for weeks and months and months. So I think that's what we've seen a lot of is like coaches really playing with that of like what works for you as an individual, right? Or how long can we have? Do we have 2 weeks and we're going to pack it in and really focus on this? Or are we adding this as a supplement to your weekly training to get you there and get you adapted ahead of a hot race? And then we're going to maintain, so that we aren't stressing you, right? The maintenance is lower stress. So maybe before your event, you can back off. You're only doing 1 or 2 of these sessions and you're able to recover a little bit, but maintain the benefit the same way you would do it with like volume and training, let's say. So I would say that's where the coach really comes in. It's like you need to really think about it as a stressor, and the data just allows a smart coach to do that.
Can you do a recovery ride in recovery heart rate, recovery power, and zone 3 heat training?
It's going to be difficult to do. I wouldn't say it's impossible, but you need enough mechanical power. Like if you overdress a lot, right? Like let's say you've got a heat suit on, maybe a couple extra layers. If you're in a really hot environment, you can put out less power. But what I would imagine is your heart rate would probably also be relatively high.
Yeah.
So I don't have a specific
then it's like
answer
the question
for you.
is it a recovery? Is it a recovery ride even?
Yeah,
I
would look at it as a workout, right? Like it is a heat training session. If you say it's a training session, I wouldn't consider it recovery. The only exception I would make here is if you're able to, at maybe the end of a let's say at the end of like a zone 2 ride, if you're able to eventually get your core temp high enough by overdressing and then go inside and lower the intensity but trap the heat, that's where we see that working. So I haven't seen specific power number on that, but maybe that's possible. And that's, again,
it's fascinating. Like I have a million questions on this.
No, like this, I actually would have a great answer for you, I'm sure. But like, I'm trying to give generalized responses so people can really play with it as individuals.
If you enjoyed this conversation, please click up here. There's another video I know that you're absolutely going to love. Click over here and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our amazing upcoming guests.